Welcome to this dark night of 5 mysterious tales, where fear lurks around every corner and the shadow of distrust looms. Do you have the courage to uncover the secrets that are whispered within these walls? First story: the alligators. In a small cabin by a river, a woman must deal with her husband's disappearances and strange behavior in the dark. Is he really turning into a crocodile? Or is it just a frightening fantasy? There was a young woman who married a man from the south. They lived together in a small cabin by the river. The pair got along pretty well, and they had 2 little boys. The woman only had one problem. Her husband was always going out at night. Sometimes he would be gone for hours, and sometimes he would stay out all night. He would always go swimming in the river, and the darker it was, the better he liked it, because he could see at night just like an owl. As soon as the boys were big enough to walk, he took them swimming with him. They would stay in the river all night long, and the woman had to sleep at home by herself. After a while, the woman started acting very strange. She told the neighbors that her husband was turning into an alligator, and he was trying to turn their little boys into alligators too.
"Something has to be done about it,"
she said. The neighbors thought the woman was losing her mind. They told her it was normal for boys to go swimming with their father, and everybody knew there weren't any alligators in that part of the country. Finally, one Sunday morning, the woman came running into town. Her clothes were soaking wet, and she told the preacher that a big alligator and 2 little alligators has pulled her into the river. She said they were trying to make her live in the river and forcing her to eat raw fish. She claimed it was her husband and her 2 little boys, and they were trying to turn her into an alligator too, but she broke loose and managed to crawl out onto the bank. It all sounded so crazy that the townspeople took the woman to the doctor. They were afraid she might hurt herself in some way. They could hear her hollering all over town until the doctor gave her an injection to knock her out. The sheriff went out to the cabin by the river, but there was nobody there. About a week after that, the doctor sent the woman to a mental institution, and she never came back. Her husband and the 2 little boys never showed up again either, and to this day, nobody knows what became of them. For years after that, hunters and fishermen would see alligators in the river on moonlit nights. They said there was always one big alligator and 2 little ones, but nobody believed them. Everybody knows there aren't any alligators in this part of the country. Second story: a new horse. On a farm, a young man struggles with a terrible curse every night. Will his friend be able to save him from this nightmare, or will they both fall prey to an ancient spell? There were 2 young men who worked together on a farm. They also shared a room. One slept at the back and the other slept near the door. As time went on, the young man who slept near the door began to look pale, thin, and sickly. He was always extremely tired and was barely able to do his work. His friend asked what was wrong.
"If you went through what I go through every night, you look bad too,"
he said. "A witch turns me into a horse and rides me all over the countryside. Let me sleep in your bed tonight," said his friend. "Then we'll see what happens." That night, the friend lay down in the bed near the door and went to sleep. Around midnight, an old woman came into the room. She stood over the friend and mumbled some strange words over him. His eyes were open, but he couldn't move a muscle. Then she slipped the bridle on him, and before he knew what was happening, she had turned him into a horse. The next thing he knew, she was riding him across the fields at breakneck speed, beating and whipping him to make him go faster. Soon they came to an old house where there was a party going on. There was a lot of music and dancing, and everyone seemed to be having a great time. The old woman hitched into a fence and went inside. While she was gone, the farmhand rubbed against the fence until finally, the bridle came off and he turned back into a human being. Then he grabbed the bridle and went into the house. When he found the old witch, he spoke those same strange words over her that she said over him. He slipped the bridle over her and turned her into a horse. Then he jumped up on her back and rode off on her. He rode her to a blacksmith and had her fitted with horseshoes. After that, he rode her to the farm where she lived with her husband. "I have a pretty good horse here," he told her husband, "but I need a stronger one. Would you like to trade?" The old man looked her over and agreed to the trade.
So they picked out another horse, and the farmhand rose away. Her husband led his new horse to the barn. He took the bridle off and went to hang it up. But when he came back, the new horse was gone. Instead, there stood his wife with horseshoes nailed to her hands and feet. He took his gun and shot her brains out. And that was the last anyone saw of the witch. Third story. The White Wolf. In the mountains of West Virginia, a hunter encounters a predator that is no ordinary wolf. Will his revenge lead him to death? In the mountains of West Virginia, there is a little place called French Creek. Many years ago, a man by the name of Bill Williams lived there. He was tall and slim and worked as a butcher.
At the time, West Virginia had a problem. The timber wolves in the area had gotten out of hand. They were killing cattle and sheep, and the farmers couldn't stop them. The state of West Virginia put a bounty on wolves. They said they would pay hunters $10 for every wolf pelt they turned in.
Bill Williams thought that was pretty good money, so he gave up his job as a butcher and turned his attention to hunting wolves. As it turned out, he was very good at it. Every year, he managed to kill over 500 wolves. At a bounty of $10 per pelt, that came to over $5,000, which was a huge amount of money in those days. After 5 years of this, Bill had killed so many wolves that there were barely any left in the area. They were almost becoming extinct, and the few that were left were smart enough to stay hidden. So Bill decided to retire. He said the wolves had made him rich, so he swore that he would never harm one again. Every day, he just sat in the local store, chewing tobacco, whittling on a piece of wood, and telling tall tales about his hunting expeditions to anyone who would listen. Everything went well for a few years. Then one day, a farmer burst into the store. He said that a white wolf had killed 2 of his sheep. He claimed he managed to get a shot at the wolf and hit it 3 times, but the bullets didn't have any effect on it. Soon, other farmers began spotting the white wolf all over the countryside, killing their livestock. They shot at it, but no matter how many times they hit the wolf, nothing seemed to stop it. The people begged Bill to do something about it, but he refused. The white wolf went on killing, and it seemed that nothing was safe. The bloody, half-eaten corpses of cows and sheep littered the countryside. Then, one night, the wolf came into Bill's yard and killed his pet cow. Bill was so angry that he forgot about his promise to never harm another wolf. He swore he would get revenge, and the next morning, he went out and bought a young lamb to use as bait. He took it out into the hills and tied it to a tree. Then he backed off about 50 yards and hid behind another tree. With his shotgun in his lap, he sat there and lay in wait. After a few days, when Bill didn't return, the people in town went looking for him. Finally, they came across the young lamb. It was still tied to the tree and seemed to be unharmed. Then they spotted Bill. He was slumped against the other tree, but he was dead. His throat had been torn open. There were no signs of a struggle. His gun hadn't been fired, and there were no tracks in the soil around him. As for the white wolf, it was never seen again. But some people say that when the moon is full, you can still hear it howling. Fourth story. The Cat's Paw. In a butcher shop, a night of burglaries uncovers a terrifying mystery. Can a cat really transform into a witch? There was a butcher who ran a successful business. Everyone in town bought their meat in his shop. One day, the butcher discovered that someone was stealing meat from the storehouse behind his shop. Every night, one of his sides of beef or his pork chops would disappear. This was a real problem because it was causing him to lose money. He decided he needed to do something about it. One night, after he closed up his shop, the butcher went out to his storehouse. He switched off the lights and stood there in the darkness, clutching his meat cleaver and waiting for the thief to arrive. He didn't have to wait long, because soon a black cat came slinking in through a gap in the door. It was the biggest cat the butcher had ever seen. It jumped up and tried to pull down a leg of lamb that was hanging from the ceiling. The butcher switched on the lights, and the cat turned and stared at him. Instead of running away, it jumped at him and tried to bite him. The butcher was taken by surprise. He swung his meat cleaver and chopped off one of the cat's paws. The cat let out a terrible shriek and began spitting and yowling and tearing around the room. Then it ran out the door and disappeared. The butcher looked down, expecting to see the cat's paw.
Instead, he saw a woman's hand that had been severed at the wrist. It was wriggling around in a pool of blood on the floor. The next morning, when the butcher was opening up his shop, one of his neighbors came running down the road, crying out for help. He said his wife had been in an accident. The butcher ran to the man's house to see if there was anything he could do. When he got there, he saw the man's wife sitting in a chair by the fire. She was clutching her arm and writhing around in pain. Her hand had been cut off, and there was nothing left but a bloody stump. The strangest thing about it was that she was spitting and yowling just like a cat. The butcher told everyone in town what he had seen, and that night, they took the woman out to a deserted field and burned her alive because they knew she was a witch. Fifth story: the nurse. In a hospital residence, some smarmy doctors play a cruel prank on a nurse. But will their joke turn into a horrific tragedy? A girl had just finished nursing school and started working in a new hospital. Although she loved her job as a nurse, she found it difficult to get along with the people she worked with. They were mostly young doctors who had just finished medical school. The problem was that they delighted in pulling pranks on each other. She found it very difficult to live with them in the red sidings next to the hospital because they stayed up late at night and made too much noise. The nurse worked very long hours and needed all the sleep she could get. Whenever she complained about their behavior, the mischievous doctors just laughed in her face and told her to shut her fat mouth. The nurse eventually had to report the young doctors to the hospital manager, and they got in all sorts of trouble. The doctors began to really hate the nurse and spent days devising a plan to get revenge on her. Finally, one of the doctors came up with a really sick prank they could play on the nurse, and the others gleefully agreed to help. That night, they broke into the mortuary in the hospital basement and sawed the arm off a corpse. Then they sneaked into the nurse's bedroom and put the severed arm under her bedclothes. They placed it at the bottom of the bed so that when she lay down, her feet would touch it. Chuckling to themselves, they stood around in the hallway, waiting for the young nurse to go to bed. As the girl went into her bedroom, the doctors had to stop themselves from laughing out loud. The nurse was suspicious of their behavior, but she was too tired to care and went into her bedroom, closing the door behind her. The men waited impatiently in the hallway for the nurse to find the severed arm in her bed, but nothing happened. There were no screams, no angry yells, only silence. After a while, the doctors got fed up waiting around and decided to turn in for the night. They assumed that they had placed the severed arm too far down in the bed, and the nurse must not have felt it. The next morning, when they woke up, the doctors went to check on the nurse. Receiving no answer when they knocked on her door, they turned the handle and went inside. The room seemed to be completely empty. The doctors searched the nurse's bedroom, and when they opened her closet, they were greeted by a horrible sight. The nurse was curled up in the corner of the closet. Her hair had turned completely white. Her eyes were rolled back in her head, and she had gone totally insane. Her face looked like it had aged 20 years, and, worst of all, she was chewing on the severed arm. If you liked this story or want to see more such content on my channel, please subscribe. Never miss new videos. Click on the subscribe button and don't forget to press the notification bell icon.